For a few years in the 1970s, the Mr. Asia Syndicate made millions.
Heroin creates its own market. It acts like a form of plague.
Until jealousy, betrayal and murder brought it all crashing down.
Clark would have threatened him. Go and kill him. If you don't, I'm going to kill you and your wife and your son.
This is Mr. Asia, a forgotten history. Listen to episode 5 now on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB.
Across the Tasman to discuss Australian sporting issues with our regular correspondent Adam Peacock. Adam, thanks for joining us. Actually, can we start with meteorological issues? How much impact has Cyclone Alfred had on sport in the state of Queensland?
Oh yeah, it's wiped out sport up there and probably will for next week as well. In terms of saying not so much the professional sphere, but it's also wiped out a bit of that. There was meant to be a couple of AFL games up there on the Gold Coast and Brisbane to open their season this year. That's been wiped away, and they've had to call those off. Conversely, the NRL basically got the Dolphins, who are based near Brisbane, to fly down to Sydney, and they reversed the fixture with South Sydney, which was pretty nimble thinking, and I think pretty much everyone agreed with it, apart from a few, and a couple of players stayed back in Brisbane, which is fair enough to tend to matters back there, because it's hitting as we speak. Basically, it's crossed the coast this morning and it's there. But yeah, racing, local football, local everything is called off, and it's a state of emergency up there. So we'll wait and see how badly it gets flooded. I've got a bad feeling that it could cop a bit Brisbane and the surrounding areas. So yeah, sport takes a back seat. Fair enough.
Yeah, absolutely right. There has been some sport, though, over the last little while. In fact, the start of the AFL season, what happens here? I mean, there's an opening round before round one. Is that right?
Yeah, so they try to get a bit clever, the AFL, and do a week zero, basically. And then there's the opening round down in Melbourne. I don't know why. I'm trying to scratch my head. I'm thinking that maybe because the week zero games are 2 games in Sydney, 2 games in Brisbane or in southeast Queensland. So we had the Swans get beaten by Hawthorn last night at the SCG, 40,000, great crowd and everything. But then next week they have all the games for the rest of the country, including, Melbourne gets activated. But it's Grand Prix weekend down there, Australian Grand Prix. So I don't know why they've done this schedule. It seems a bit strange. Why don't you just back yourself and start normally? Because I think they're now looking at it like, NRL does this. They go to Vegas and have a big thing and blah, blah, blah. We've got to do something different. It's a bit weird. Just look after yourself. So, yeah. Anyway, season's underway.
Yep, it is. We'll keep tabs on it across the next few months, as we will the NRL season, which is also underway, as you mentioned, started in Vegas last weekend. The Warriors didn't have much of a time there on the field anyway. Not sure about what they got up to off the field, but But the season is underway with a couple of close contests last night. Pretty low scoring as well in the West Tigers Knights game and the Rabbitohs Dolphins.
Yeah, there was a bit of weather around in Sydney last night. So, first proper game of the season, wet ball, it makes things a bit difficult, be totally fluid in attack. So you have to rely on the other things that coaches love relying on, like resilience and, effort and all that. Benji Marshall was filthy that West Tigers let one slip last night. I think that was a real game to take for the Tigers, who were trying to rebuild and just get away from the wooden spoon. I don't think Newcastle are going to set the world on fire either. So those two, I'm not sure they're final aspirants, but they're 2 sides that wanted to win last night, and Newcastle did, and South, without a number of their stars, including Cam Murray and Latrell Mitchell, got it done over the depleted, as mentioned, Dolphins. But yeah, the weather played a part in all that last night.
How do you feel about the chances of your Sea Eagles in 2025?
Pretty good. Pretty happy with the addition of Jazz Tavanga, actually. He's a player that we need. Our forward pack isn't certainly as good as our backline. Mind you, our backline's pretty hot. So that's been the issue for Manly, that the ability to stop other teams getting on a roll. So Jazz hopefully comes in. I saw he's listed as number 9 as a hooker tonight. I'm not sure he's going to actually play there. But yeah, I still don't think we have enough depth. I think landing around 5 to 8 on the ladder would be about the ideal situation for Manly this season.
Does it feel like the Storm, the Panthers, and then a big gap to the rest? Is that still the case?
Yeah, well, everyone's tipping the Storm, like bigging up the Storm big. Basically, they haven't lost, they've gained a bit, and they get all their good players and they keep them fit. They're going to be a real hard team to stop. And I think people looking at Penrith going, eventually it's going to have to tell losing players being chipped away at the year after year. So, yeah, I think Storm and then a pack, including Penrith. But around that, it's there for some teams to jump out like a Bulldogs did last season. They could improve again this season, not sure. So, yeah, it's pretty open underneath that, but everyone's pretty keen on the Storm.
All right, a couple of other matters to discuss. Steve Smith, after Australia's exit from the Champions Trophy at the semi-final stage earlier this week, has announced his retirement from one-day international cricket. He'll still play T20 and Test matches. Any surprise here?
A little bit of a surprise it was so abrupt. But when you look at it and think, oh, it's a long way to the 2027 World Cup, he wants to go and play franchise cricket everywhere. So it makes sense when you look at it like that. It just happened so quickly, 24 hours after the Champions Trophy loss. But, yeah, amazing career, 2 World Cup wins, not bad.
Not bad indeed. And just before you go, I saw some footage online last night of a National Premier League football game. This is obviously not the A-League, but the one, all the states have their own NPL or National Premier League. And it was from a Preston Lions game against South Melbourne, and it was absolutely packed.
9,000 at a suburban ground. It looked unreal. It sounded unreal. It was just a great performance by everyone off the field there at Preston to be able to get a crew like that to the ground, and it's not an outlier for that club. I would say, Piney, that I'm really impressed with what Auckland FC have done off the pitch to kind of congregate a community, not out of nowhere, but bring together the football community. They don't have an academy that's going in and nicking 13-year-olds off clubs who are trying to develop. They're actually helping them with resources to build them up, and then they'll bring them into a reserve league and then transition into professional, getting a great crowd there. Preston have got their local Macedonian community right behind the club, and they've made Friday nights at their home ground an event. So it's a social event as much as anything and going along there. And I noticed that behind one of the goals there at Auckland, it feels like a social event as much as anything going to watch a game of football as well. That's what you need in this day and age. You need to make it an event, and that's something that the NRL have done really well in the last couple of years since COVID to bring people back through the gates. And, yeah, Preston, hats off, doing it as well as anyone in Australian football about getting your community around your football club and making something of it.
Yeah, terrific scenes. It was great to see. Lots to cover off. We've done it, I think. Let's catch up again next Saturday.
Sounds good, mate.
Thanks, Adam. Adam Peacock there, our Australian correspondent, around about this time every Saturday afternoon on Weekend Sport.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.